The Steve Lobby Agency presents the Christian Publishing Show, a podcast for writers who want to advance Christ's kingdom using the written word. Here's your host, Thomas Umstattd Jr.
How do dead trees turn into books in people's hands? At first glance, they appear on bookshelves as if by magic. They arrive in the mail as if by magic, but it is not magic. Behind the scenes, there are thousands of people working hard to make sure books get from the printer into the hands of readers like you. And if you want your book to wind up in readers' hands, this is not an episode you are going to want to miss. Our guest today is an author of more than 15 books herself, of both fiction and nonfiction. She also runs an e-commerce website, as well as an order fulfillment and logistics company that works with traditionally published authors. And she's the CEO of Stonewater Books, helping independent authors get print books into the retail supply chain. In short, she really knows what she's talking about. Tracy Higley, welcome to the Christian Publishing Show.
Thank you, Thomas. Can't wait to talk about all this stuff.
So tell us a little bit about your story. How did you get into the fulfillment business in the first place?
So we kind of fell into e-commerce, first of all, and it's just a funny, silly story where our daughter was 11 and she wanted to go to camp, and so we said, "Hey, if you make some money, we'll help the other missing parts of the money, and we'll put in a little ourselves, and you can go to camp." It was horse camp in the summer she wanted to go to, so she started selling some things online on eBay, and it just kind of took off from there, and all of a sudden, this was back in 2004, and e-commerce was early, and we were just like, hey, we can maybe make a few bucks on the side here. And so I pushed into it a little bit, and we started a website and just really fell into e-commerce and figured things out as we were going along, and quickly turned into a full-time business. And my husband was able to quit his job, and so we started doing that full-time. And then as time went on, we got really good. We started some other websites with different products, got really good at shipping, and people started coming to us and saying, I want to sell online, but I really don't want to ship. So can you ship for me? So we, just a few years ago, started a new branch of a logistics and order fulfillment company. So we ship our own products still that we're selling, but we also ship for other sellers as well. And then on the side, because I've been writing books, I've also gotten into the whole distribution side and fulfillment side of books specifically.
Yeah, so speaking of books, do walk us through that supply chain. How does a dead tree turn into a book in someone's shelf?
So obviously we're talking about print books when we're talking about dead trees. And that's primarily, I think, what we'll be talking about today is print books. We all probably pretty much know how ebooks get into the e-readers of people. That
really is magic. Well, it's not magic with the paper books. It's technology magic for the ebook.
It's the ebook fairies that are flying it through the air invisibly to your e-reader. But print books, obviously, a little more complicated. And, there's a lot involved from the printing and the binding of it itself. There's the distribution, there's the warehousing and storage, there's the getting it to the bookstore or the online retailer, whichever it may be, and the shipping directly to the customer. So the book really does pass through a lot of different steps, a lot of different hands. And, if you're traditionally published, your publisher is handling all of that. And it's magic to you because it just happens and you tell your readers, hey, I've got a new book out, and they can order it immediately. If you're indie published, that's a little bit trickier, and you have to kind of really think through your options.
That's right. So kind of walking through those, paper is made out of dead trees, and then the paper is given to printers who then print the books. They either print them one at a time or in big batches. And then, as you said, they're put into a warehouse. So why are they put into a warehouse? Why are they not just sent out to all of the customers right away?
Well, it's really about aggregating things into the simplest possible process. So your individual bookstore or even an online retailer, they have their ordering processes. They have who they want to order from. So let's just say small mom and pop bookstore down the road, even though there's not that many of them left, but really any bookstore, any physical brick and mortar bookstore, they're going to have specific distributors they want to order from. They don't want to order from every single publisher, every single independent author. That's just not workable for them. They want to aggregate their orders together so they get shipping deals and they get discounts and they have a sales rep and all that. So they're going to want to order from a distributor.
Because it doesn't make sense to have 20 minutes worth of phone calls to sell a $20 book for a $2 profit.
And bookstores don't carry that many books on the shelves at one time, of any one title. So if they're just throwing, all of their efforts to the wind here, to scatter it around all the different books there are, that's not cost effective for them. So they want to order from a distributor, and the distributor exists then to house all of those print books in one place and be able to ship them in bulk, 6 of these and 4 of these and 2 of these, to the bookstore that has placed their weekly order, monthly order, whatever it might be. So it's really about aggregating things into pockets, where the physical stuff is located to make the whole system run better.
I'm picturing the warehouse from Indiana Jones, where it's just box after box after box, except instead of being filled with rare artifacts, each one of those crates is filled with books. And the retailer's placing orders to that warehouse, and somebody goes to the correct box, pulls out the book, and then mails it to that retailer, so that regardless of who wrote the book and who published the book, the retailer only contacts one super warehouse.
Right. And I've walked through those warehouses, and they're divided a little differently. Your book is not just in a crate somewhere, with the Lost Ark of the Covenant. It's also, it's probably on a pallet, but then there's a box or two on a shelf, and there may even be some loose ones on a shelf. So they're in different locations. But the picker, who would be the name of the person who picks the order in the warehouse, is going to go to one place, and they're going to pick your book, and they're going to pick other books as well to fill that order.
That's just what they want you to think. The Ark of the Covenant really is there behind the Da Vinci Code box books.
That would be the most logical place for it. Yeah.
So the computer, the actual ordering is done by the computer. So when you buy your book at Barnes & Noble and you scan, it goes dink on the little UBC reader, the barcode reader. Their computer is placing an order for a replacement book. Most likely. Sometimes it's placing an order for 2, sometimes for 0, but let's just assume it's placing an order for a replacement book. And so then the warehouse gets an order. Oh, somebody bought a copy from Barnes & Noble. We got to replace that copy. We'll put that in the next shipment. So picker goes out. He's got his hunt list of rare artifacts and books he's got to find. He comes back with the books, and then they take those books, they put them in a box, and then who delivers that box from Warehouse 13 to the Barnes & Noble?
Typically, Barnes & Noble is going to pay the shipping. It depends on the buyer, but that is going to go through whatever the distributor uses. So, if it's a full container truckload, that's going to be some kind of freight company. If it's one single box, it might be FedEx. It just really depends on how large the store is that's receiving and how large the order itself is. What freight carrier makes the most sense?
So in 2019 and before, no one ever paid attention to supply chains because it didn't affect our daily lives. And then something happened in 2020, and suddenly supply chains are affecting everything, right? You can't get podcast microphones for love or for money right now on the internet because the supply chains are disrupted. So has that happened at all in publishing? Have you seen the publishing supply chains disrupted, or are books still flowing through the system?
Well, I wouldn't say they're disrupted in the sense of stopped entirely, but one big, clinker that got thrown into the system is that Amazon really pulled back on ordering from publishers, ordering from distributors. They started prioritizing essential things and somehow crazily deemed print books not essential, which is just ludicrous. But toilet paper somehow took precedence over print books, so I would argue about the value system there. But yeah, so I mean, the pandemic, we really have yet to see what it will do long term to the numbers. I think, back when e-readers and ebooks first hit the market, I think the predictions were that paper was dead, print was dead, and that we would only have ebooks soon. And that really hasn't borne out. That hasn't been the case. The print books still make up a huge part of the market. Print is not dead. I think the pandemic has probably pushed a few more people into ebooks than, that used to be in paper, possibly because they couldn't go and browse a store and their buying habits maybe changed. But remember that buying online and buying an ebook are not synonymous. You could still have shifted your buying habits to buying online, but you're still buying print online. Just because you're buying online doesn't mean you're buying an ebook. So I think we don't know yet, what the buying shifts will kind of all fall out to be when all this is over. But I don't think print's going anywhere. I think a large amount of millennials really prefer print. And so there's no real reason to think, ebooks are it. If I'm going to publish a book, there's no reason to do anything but an ebook. Just like some people only listen to audio, some people only read in print.
Print was actually up a couple of years ago. I think it's up a little bit every year right now. It may very much be like vinyl. Everyone keeps saying vinyl is dead, and vinyl looks like it will outlive cassette tapes, which were supposed to kill it all those years ago. There's something about that tangible analog experience, and I will confirm millennials really do like paper books. So we've kind of given an overview of the system. Before we talk, because I know a lot of people are like, yeah, I'm an indie, how do I get in? So we'll get to that. Don't worry. But I do want to first talk about the difference between distribution and fulfillment, because I feel like a lot of authors throw these terms out like they're the same thing, and yet there is an important difference between these two.
Yeah. So distribution, when you're talking about distribution, what you're really talking about is getting your book into sort of the supply chain, let's call it. So you're getting your book into a place where bookstores, whether they're indie bookstores or even large online retailers, whatever, where, let's say, Barnes & Noble or your bookstore down the street, you're getting it into a place where those retailers typically order their books from. So what we were talking about before, where they can place an order for a bunch of different books. It all comes in one box or one crate or one pallet or one truck, because they've ordered all their different books from the same distributor. So that is distribution, where you're getting your books kind of into that chain. Fulfillment, on the other hand, is really more of a broad, kind of vague term where you're really just talking about how does a book get directly into the hands of a reader, and you could be doing your own fulfillment out of your garage. Your kids could be slapping labels on bubble mailers and getting the things to the post office. That could be your fulfillment. You could hire somebody to do your fulfillment. You could hire a fulfillment house, a fulfillment provider to do that fulfillment. But you're really, in a sense, acting as your own distributor. You're figuring out how to get these books sold, and then you're getting them shipped in one way or another, whether you're paying someone or doing it yourself.
The way I like to think of it is distribution is being on the computer in the Barnes & Noble, where they know who to call to order the book. And fulfillment is actually getting the book from one place to the other. And you can be in the computer, but it's, quote, out of stock, unquote. They can't fulfill the order. And you can also have fulfillment where, somebody calls up and like, I want 20 copies of my book for my Bible study, and you ship them 20 copies of the book. That's fulfillment without distribution.
Right.
And so some people have one, some people have another. A lot of companies do both at the same time. So there's not just one Warehouse 13. There is also Warehouse 12 and Warehouse 11. There is one Warehouse 13 that's bigger than all the others, though. Arguably, Ingram is the biggest, although Amazon, I feel like, has their own warehouses that rival Ingram. Let's talk a little bit about how indies entered this market, because it used to be indies weren't really welcome. Self-published authors didn't really have access to the supply chain unless they put on a mask and pretended to be a big publisher. How has that changed, and what does the landscape look like these days for indies?
Yeah, so there really are two routes for an indie. So we can talk about these two different strategies and kind of compare and contrast. And really, which route is right for you depends on a few things. And one of the things it depends on is really what is your goal. So I think it behooves every author to really ask themselves, what is my goal in selling print books specifically, since that's what we're talking about here. Is my goal audience? Do I want to get my book in the hands of as many people as possible, as large of an audience as possible, regardless of the revenue per book, regardless of the total revenue I make? I want to just grow that audience as large as possible. Is your goal revenue? So, whether it's total revenue or revenue per book, to make the most amount of money you can, or is your goal really, or your preference, simplicity, where you really just want the simplest route. You want the most hands-off, and you're willing to sacrifice a bit of revenue, a bit of sales, a bit of audience, but you just really want something very, very simple. So, you really need to think that through about like which strategy, do I want to pursue based on what I'm really after here. So the two general strategies then would be the print on demand and getting your book into distribution, as we talked about, where it's in a warehouse somewhere and it can be ordered by any bookstore anywhere. So those are kind of the two routes, and we can talk about both of them. But do you want to talk about the distribution?
Yeah, let's talk about print on demand first, because print on demand promises distribution, at least with the big two. Because really, if you're going print on demand, you really only want to work with one of two companies. You either want to work with Amazon directly; they have their own print on demand service, or you want to work with Ingram Spark. Pretty much every other company that says they do print on demand just buys it from one of those two companies and sells it to you at a markup. And so in general, it doesn't make sense to pay anybody else when you can pay those companies directly and save a lot of money. And both companies say we provide distribution. So when they say that, when Ingram Spark or Amazon says we give your book that's a print on demand book distribution, what do they mean when they say that?
Yeah, what they mean is something very, very simple. And anybody who's indie publishing needs to be really, really aware of what that means. When they say we provide distribution, they do not mean that they're going to put any effort whatsoever into selling your book. They're not going to do anything to market your book, to push your book in any way. What they're saying is we will put your book in a listing in the industry-wide system in the computer, and so it will be orderable. That's all. So if your grandmother who lives in 3 states over walks into a bookstore and says, I want to order my granddaughter's book, and the bookstore types in the name and your author name and the title, the bookstore clerk will see that book and will say, yes, we can get that book in. It might take a little while, but we can order that book. So that is what they mean when they say that they will put it into distribution. They will make it available and orderable. And I want to just kind of add on to what you're saying about Ingram Spark and Amazon's two print-on-demand programs. And you were saying that you would really want to be in one or the other of them. I would say that if you're going to be in Amazon's program, that I would also advise to be in both, because when you do expanded distribution through Amazon and allow Amazon to go and sell your books to other distributors, very few bookstores or distributors are going to buy it from Amazon, and you're going to make far less money on that book. So really, if you're going to do Amazon's print on demand, I would say also do Ingram Spark's print on demand because the distribution there is going to be a little better for you.
Because there's a soft boycott. That indie bookstore hates giving money to Amazon. They really, really hate it.
And not just the indie bookstore, but, christianbook.com.
Barnes & Noble hates Amazon.
Barnes & Noble hates it.
Basically, everyone who sells a book who isn't Amazon hates Amazon.
Right. So, they're going to be hesitant to order it, or they may just say flat out, I won't order it for you. Or that bookstore clerk types it in and sees that the only place to get it is through Amazon, and they just look up and say to grandma, sorry, I can't get that book, because they just refuse to. So, so if you're going to do Amazon's print on demand, I would suggest you also do Ingram Spark. The distribution model there is just a little better into places that are not Amazon.
And Ingram Spark's other advantage is that they have print-on-demand machines in other countries. So Australia, they can print the book in Australia, and you don't have to pay the same taxes, from what I understand, as if you printed the book in America and mailed it to Australia. So Australia's got really high tariffs because they're very far away. Well, shipping's kind of a big deal to get it to the other side of the planet, whereas printing it in Australia and then fulfilling it in Australia is far more efficient. And Ingram Spark's got the biggest global network of printers and fulfillment. That's their big claim to fame. But you're exactly right in that all you're getting is a listing in the white pages and a phone number. There's no effort to make your phone ring, so to speak, for your book. And so how do you get it to ring? How do you get the bookstores to actually order your book ahead of time? So they're not waiting for grandma to come in and place an order, but they're actually ordering a copy to put on the shelf for someone to discover in the bookstore.
That's a big hurdle to jump if you're doing print on demand. They're generally just not going to do that unless it's, say, your local bookstore that you've walked into and said, hey, I'm releasing a new book. I'm going to be sending readers here. It'd be smart for you to get the local author's books on the shelf, or you've got some kind of marketing platform or contacts at a bookstore or whatever that's going to encourage them to actually order ahead. A print-on-demand book is not typically ordered ahead. It's kind of, in some ways an oxymoron. I mean, that's what print-on-demand is. They're waiting for the demand. So they're not necessarily going to get that book in ahead of time on a shelf unless you've put in some sort of effort to make that happen, which is hard to do.
And in Warehouse 13, there is no crate of books for the print-on-demand books. Instead, in the middle of the warehouse is a machine, and all it's doing is printing the books 24/7, are coming out of the machine and going straight into the box where it's being shipped. So it's print-on-demand is not some colloquialism. It is a literal description of what's happening. The order happens, and then the book is printed, and then it's put in the box and mailed. So let's talk about the other way. This is where you're getting a bunch of books printed, and they are going into the warehouse. Then how does that change the game for indies if they take that route?
Yeah. So then we're talking about doing a print run, typically on an offset printer. So what that means is that the printer is actually creating plates that they're using to print the book rather than the whole thing being a digital process one at a time. They're creating these plates to make the process more economical and faster to print larger runs at one time. So the downside of that is that the upfront cost is a little higher because they have to make these plates. And so to get into that and have some books printed is going to be more expensive per copy until you start getting into larger quantities. So there's kind of like a break point where, if you're going to print 500 of them, well, they're going to charge you so much because they have to put so much effort and time into making those plates and getting it all set up that, each copy of those 500 is going to be pretty pricey. If you jump that to 5,000, you would be astonished at how the price starts to drop per copy. So your print run, if you're able and believe you can sell enough books, and I kind of counsel people that right around 3,000, I would not print less than 3,000 as an offset print run. But if you feel confident that you can sell 3,000 books in one way or another, and we can talk about the different ways, but that you can sell that many books and do a print run and you have the upfront money to be able to do that, then the print cost there is going to be significantly lower than what let's say Amazon would charge you as a print cost in their POD program. So if we use let's say $14.99 book, or we'll just say $15 for the ease of math. We'll do just a little bit of math here. If you're selling that $15 book on Amazon, Amazon's going to keep about $5 of that to print it. And they're going to keep about $6 of it to serve as your distributor, your warehouse, and shipping it to your customer and all of that. So they're going to keep about $11 of it. You're going to keep about $4. So of that $5, they're going to charge you to print it. If you were to do an offset print run of, say, 3,000 to 4,000 of those books, you might pay only more like $2 to print that book. So you're going to save some considerable money there per book in printing. Now, you're going to pay more to the bookstore and the distributor, and so it's going to even them out. So really, that print run per book is probably going to be about the same amount of revenue per book.
At 3,000 copies, but the bigger the volume is, the more that price drops. So that $20 Harry Potter hardback you bought may have only cost 90 cents to print because they printed 1 million of them.
Yeah. Oh, probably not even 90 cents. Yeah. So, but the other thing about that, even though the POD, the print on demand, and the print run might put about the same amount per book in your pocket, doing that print run is going to expose you to the larger distribution chain. And so your total revenue is going to go up because you're going to sell more copies. So whereas you might only have sold 1,000 through Amazon, you might now sell 3,000 through, more distribution, better distribution. And so the print per, the profit per copy might be about the same, but the total number of copies sold is going to drive the revenue up. So, those audience revenue simplicity questions, the revenue is definitely going to be up higher here. The audience is going to be up higher here. But then, of course, we're sacrificing a little bit of simplicity because we're talking about getting something printed ahead of time and getting it into a retail distributor.
And I will say a very common mistake I see a lot of indies make is that they start looking at those price per book breakdowns. And they're like, oh, well, the price per book really changes if I print 5,000 copies and goes down even more if I print 10,000 copies. And they end up printing way more books than they have the capacity to sell. And then they're stuck with books that they've paid for that now need to be stored somewhere. And it's, the old, story of authors with garages full of books they can't sell is a real risk. And so my advice is, if you're just getting started, do print on demand for your first book, unless you're doing crowdfunding. So if you do a Kickstarter and you pre-sell 3,000 copies of your book on Kickstarter, that's great. Go ahead and place an order for 5,000 or 6,000 copies because you already know you've sold a bunch of them and you'll have a good idea of how many more you'll be able to sell. But if you're doing this just at the very beginning, be aware of how distribution works and keep listening to the episode, but don't go out and print 10,000 copies of your book because that can be prohibitively expensive.
Yeah, you really have to have a good sense of how many you can sell. And so it's a very good option for people who are either hybrid. So they still have traditional publishers who are kind of pushing their books elsewhere and making their name known. Or they've gone maybe indie, but they have a good track record behind them of either traditional or indie printing or publishing where their books on a bookstore shelf are going to be picked up by authors and bought just because of name recognition or the bookstore's hand selling them, referring them, or maybe they have a topic that people are, if it's a nonfiction book, that people are really, it's a really hot topic right now. People are really searching for it in a bookstore on shelves, and it's likely to move just because of that. So yeah, you have to be pretty confident in the numbers that you can move before you want to commit a chunk of money to a print run.
Now, one question I imagine a lot of people are asking is if distribution is different for Christian authors, because there's a lot of places that Christians buy books, like churches and Christian bookstores, Christian coffee shops. Does that change the nature of distribution for Christian authors, or should it? Are there Christian distribution companies? Like, what does that landscape look for a Christian writer?
It does, yeah, because just like we were saying that, a bookstore likes to order all of their books from one place, they're going to want to order from the place where the most books are available that they're wanting to order. So there are Christian distributors. Ingram has its own, not to be confused with Ingram Spark, which is like their print on demand little division, but Ingram as a distributor has its own division, which is Spring Arbor, that focuses on Christian books. And there are other Christian distributors, the main one of which is Anchor Distributors, that we work with at Stonewater, and we can talk about that a little bit later. But Christian distributors, Christian book distributors that have they're primarily servicing the Christian market. So that's where churches and those coffee shops that have the spirals and, spiral book things and Christian bookstores are ordering from.
Because while the online world is all about algorithms, the offline world's still a lot about relationships. And it's about the actual relationships between the human beings at the distributor and the human beings at these bookstores. I know this seems crazy, but part of the world still works on human-to-human connections and not computer-to-computer connections. In the offline world, the computer connection's often only created after the human connection has been formed. And so while Ingram may be the biggest in the world and Amazon's really big, it's Anchor, the Christian one, that's got the greatest presence in a lot of the Christian market.
Right. And you also have the benefit, depending on how you go about it, if you're getting your book into distribution, say through Anchor, so that bookstores can order it there. Depending on how long of a lead time you give it and what your arrangement is there, you also may have sales representation. So Anchor has sales reps who go and talk to christianbook.com, talk to Amazon buyers, talk to Barnes & Noble buyers, talk to independent store buyers, and they're saying, hey, these are the books that we have available in this sales cycle. This is what's coming out. This is the author. You know her, you know him. You're going to want this book on your shelf, and they're actually doing a little bit of a sales push. So that's definitely something that you're not getting with print on demand.
That's right, because at a lot of bookstores, what books are on the shelf, especially which books are on the shelf facing out rather than spine out, those are decisions being made by a human. There's actual human who's getting pitches from salespeople being like, put my book, right? Everyone wants their book on that shelf, and a human is making the decision. Amazon's brick and mortar bookstores are not that way. Those are algorithmically generated decisions where the computer is actually deciding which books go on the shelf. And I did an episode on my other podcast, Novel Marketing, where I break down exactly how a Amazon brick and mortar store works, and it's a completely different approach. So just realize what we're talking about here doesn't apply to Amazon brick and mortar stores. Those are all just the computer, and basically as long as you're getting lots of sales and lots of reviews from users in that area, that's how you get on. There's no making friends with the book buyer and getting them to buy your book. That's not how it works. But that is what a distributor like Anchor does. And is that the sort of thing that is available for indie authors? Like if an indie author wants the salesperson to put their book in the catalog, is that possible? And if so, how?
Yeah, and it didn't used to be. So we kind of had the same bottleneck that we had with bookstores, in that bookstores don't want to order from a bunch of different indie authors. They want to order from their distributor. Well, a distributor like Anchor doesn't really want to deal with a whole bunch of indie authors either. They, are already have their hands full with the publishing houses that they deal with, and publishers are already aggregating books for them and saying, okay, here's what we've got coming out in September or this fall or whatever. And so distributors are also saying, no, 4,000 million indie authors out there, please do not call us and ask us to put your book in our warehouse and put it in our catalog. And so basically what had developed over the past few years is this newer company, Stonewater Books, that I've been working with, that is really aggregating the indie authors together into, and kind of vetting, so into a group of authors that it makes sense for them to be in distribution, that they're getting shepherded a bit through the printing process, through making sure that the book is what it needs to be, the cover is up to par, and all of that. And then presenting that to the distributor, to Anchor is the partner that we work with, in order to get those books into their catalog and have their sales reps be talking about them, if they have enough lead time on that, to their buyers. So yes, so there is that way for indie authors now to get into retail distribution, and really their book then looks like a book by any other trad publisher when it is presented to the buyers that are out there, the retailers that are out there.
And so this is them basically publishing their own book, but hiring Stonewater to be an interface into this distribution network. And getting on the computer is the easy part. This is more than that. This is having salespeople doing the pitching, getting into the actual catalog. And by catalog, I know this will blow your mind, but it's actually a physical catalog.
Yes, it is.
They print a catalog, and they're like, these are all the new books in spring, and they put the covers of all the books and the little blurb in an actual physical catalog, and then a salesperson goes to the bookstore with a box of donuts and the catalog, and they put it there on the counter. I don't know if there's donuts, but there better be. This person has a lot of influence. But they go in, they talk to the buyer, and like, here are the books that we have. And in the catalog, it's just like any other kind of catalog where some books get more prominent, some books get less prominence. And Stonewater is a way into the Anchor catalog, which is the biggest, or arguably the biggest catalog in the Christian space. Ingram's biggest worldwide, but Anchor has got a really big presence in the Christian space.
Right. So yes, just like you said, it's a way into distribution, and of course, you're giving up little chunks of your total revenue as you're entering into these different partnerships. But remember, you're giving up a big chunk to Amazon if you're doing print on demand, or Ingram Spark if you're doing print on demand with them too. So, you tend not to think about that because you just look at the bottom line and say, oh, I've got $3 in my pocket, $4 in my pocket, and that's great, and that's typically much better than the royalty rate you might have been getting if you were previously traditionally published. But this is just a kind of a different way. You're paying less for print. The bookstore is getting a cut. The distributor's getting a cut, but you're still ending up with the same or more money in your pocket, depending on the total units that are moved.
So what kind of authors are a good fit for a company like Stonewater?
So the best authors for a company like Stonewater are really in, putting your book into distribution are ones who can either market their books really well themselves so that they know they can move units, or their name alone is enough to move units. So a bookstore buyer is going to say, oh, yes, I know that author. We can sell her books. We've sold her books well in the past. So yes, I'll take 6, I'll take 10, whatever. So name recognition, or you've got a platform, that you can be pushing from. You've got a large mailing list. You have a huge amount of really rabid readers who are just waiting for your next book to come out. And you have some confidence. So we're not talking about brand new authors unless for some reason you have some other type of celebrity attached to yourself that your first book is still going to be, a hit out of the park.
Let me put it this way. On the application form to have Anchor feature your book, to have your book, the very first question is, what is the size of your email list? And if your answer to that question ends in the word 100, Anchor is not for you.
Agreed.
They're not going to look at any of the subsequent questions, right? It's like, nope, this person's not ready. Their platform's not big enough, because they need to sell probably at least 1,000 books, at least 500 books to make it worth paying people by the hour to do all of the labor for this process. It doesn't make sense if they're only going to sell a handful of books.
Right. And also, understand that they make money when your book sells. That's how they make money. You don't pay them a big fee to have your book in their warehouse. I mean, you pay some storage, but you don't pay, you're not plunking down thousands of dollars for the privilege of having your book in their warehouse. They have your book in their warehouse because they make money when you sell it, when it ships out and they have, see it sold. So if Stonewater doesn't believe that your book is going to sell, then that money isn't going to happen. That's like a cut of nothing is, nothing. So it's not a good fit if the books aren't going to move. So really, I think, like I said, I think it kind of comes back to saying, well, what are my goals here? Is it simplicity? Is it larger revenue? Is it a larger audience? And also, where am I in my career? And there are some options here too, to probably just touch on lightly for traditionally published authors, even though we've, mainly been focusing on indie. And there is one other thing that I kind of like a sort of an add-on strategy besides print on demand and distribution that I really feel strongly that every author should be doing that we haven't talked at all about. So I want to throw that in there too. And that add-on strategy is, I am a big believer in trying to develop your direct sales to your readers specifically, and bypassing all of this, bypassing as much as you can, Amazon and distribution and all of that, and being able to sell direct to your readers as much as you can. So if you've got a mailing list and you've got loyal readers who are waiting for your next book to come out, your best revenue maker and I think best strategy is, as much as possible, to sell directly to those readers off of your own website. So there's, a couple of ways you can do that range, from cost to, higher cost to higher simplicity, and Stonewater can help with that as well. But, again, you can have your kids in the basement shipping books out if that is what works for you. But you're really going to make the most money per book by doing that. And those readers are sort of your, like, off the top guaranteed readers. It's the people that you're saying, hey, I have another book out, and they're going to go buy it right away. You might as well keep as much of their money as possible and not give it to a bookstore or Amazon or, anybody.
Yeah, and it's the difference between $3 a copy, which is what you'd make selling a paper copy on Amazon, give or take, and $10 a copy, which is what you'd make selling it yourself. Now, you do have to sell enough copies on your website to justify the cost of building out the e-commerce, because that's not cheap, and also working, storing books with a company like Stonewater, or paying your kids. Now, obviously, paying your kids is a really cheap way of doing it, and you can get bubble mailers at Sam's Club for books that'll fit a normal paperback pretty cheaply. So, if But again, it's labor. If you have somebody writing with a pen, so maybe you get a label maker, and then you're like, oh, now I need to buy shelving. And if you're not careful, you end up spending a lot of money, and you end up getting a bigger percentage of a smaller piece of fruit. And so you really need, again, I would say these are strategies for book 2 on. You need to know I'm going to be selling enough copies to justify all of this work.
Though I will push back a little bit and say that, WordPress, if you have a WordPress website, that the WooCommerce plugin is very easy to use, and it's a very easy step into e-commerce in the sense of you can get your books on there, put a price, have an add to cart button, and those orders will come to you via email, and you can print labels fairly easily. And there also is, Stonewater Books or other places that will actually receive those orders automatically. It's completely hands-off for you. The order goes to that fulfillment company. They get it automatically. They pack up your book, they ship it, and you have absolutely nothing to do with it, and you give up a couple bucks in the process. But it really is pretty simple, and you don't have to build out, a huge e-commerce site with tons of bells and whistles to be able to start selling, 1 book, 2 books. The other thing about selling books on your own website, I just want to throw in there for traditionally published authors. I run into a lot of traditionally published authors who do have crates of books or a garage full of books for one reason or another. They may have bought rights back sometimes, and in the process bought a lot of physical books, or for whatever reason they got a really good author discount and decided they would buy a bunch of them or whatever. And this is a good option for them to be able to sell direct on their website, have a fulfillment provider that handles all of it, get those books out of your garage. That's definitely a way to go as well. And if you have the rights back on a print book, so if you own the rights and you have a bunch of print books already sitting in your house, you can also put them into the Amazon Advantage program. It's another avenue. And to the buyer on the Amazon website, it looks no different than a book that a publisher is selling. It's shipped by Amazon. It's carried by Amazon. So that's a really good program too.
And Stonewater helps with that. And one other way that you can do this, I know we're throwing out a lot of ideas here, but it's a way we can have your cake and eat it too. If the idea of doing credit cards on your website stresses you out, even though WooCommerce is totally easier than back when I was a kid when we were chiseling our websites with stone tablets, is to do a Kickstarter, which allows, you do a big Kickstarter, you sell a bunch of books ahead of time. And then I know, Tracy, you do a lot of work with Kickstarter campaigns where somebody will give you their list of backers. Here's the 500 people who backed, and they ship you 500 books. And then you're the ones who make sure that each person gets the right reward for their Kickstarter backing.
Yeah. We also have some authors we work with who love to do pre-orders. And so they'll set up a pre-order on their own website, and the reader knows that they're ordering it. It's not going to be shipped until May or whatever the book is coming out. And so on our end, we are just aggregating those orders as they come in over a period of months. And we're just kind of digitally setting them aside into an on hold kind of a department section. And as soon as the book releases, as soon as the book comes in boxes to us, to our warehouse, within a couple of days, we've turned all those orders around and shipped all those books out to readers. And so that's even something that you can set up ahead of time and have orders trickling in and then ship all at one time if you wanted to do a pre-order and a big new release like that.
And it's not very expensive, because one of the things that fulfillment companies like Stonewater, but all the others too, is that they get special pricing from UPS. They don't pay the same price. When you go to Office Depot to mail your book, you're paying a lot more money because you're paying for all of that human interaction. Whereas with Stonewater, they have a system and they have special perks with UPS, and that allows them to be really competitive on pricing. And that's true across the board, that you're going to pay more doing it yourself for the actual shipping part than they would. You pay less for the handling because you're not paying yourself for handling. But that is another thing to keep in mind as you're pricing this out.
Yeah, I would really encourage anybody who maybe is already in that situation where they're shipping books themselves, for whatever reason, they're already selling direct and shipping, and they've got, the labels and the envelopes, and they have books spread across their dining room table with order slips next to them. That's a hassle you don't need. And, I would say think about giving up just a little bit of the revenue there in order to just have that completely off your plate. It's a pretty nice freeing thing to know that you're selling books and they're being shipped, but you just have nothing to do with it.
I did it once after the Kickstarter for my book. We took a whole room of the house and we turned it into a little fulfillment center, and we had this whole assembly line where we were packing, and I'm there signing books. And when we were done, I was like, Hashtag never forget. Hashtag never again.
Yeah. And speaking of Kickstarter and sign books and all of that, I just want to throw that out there too, that print does give you some options to do some fun things that you can't do with ebooks. Some kind of premium type things where maybe it's a hardcover, maybe it's a signed copy. There's things you can do that you can then premium price, or maybe it's just the perk for the person buying direct from you because you're going to make more money. So you don't really even need to increase the price. But, we've got Brandon Sanderson's, $7 million Kickstarter leading the way into, special, we did a leather-bound hardcover, all of that. And of course, we're not going to be hitting numbers like that. But the point is that there's a lot of things you can do with print that, so for an example, I have a series that I'm going to be publishing next year, and the main character, the protagonist in this series, is a sketch artist. She sketches archaeological finds. And so what I'm planning to do is that the print version will have some of her sketches in it. So I'm going to hire somebody, probably off Fiverr or somewhere, to do some sketches that she would have done. And, the print book is going to be printed as though this were her sketches. So that's not something I can do as easily in an ebook because of the formatting, the page problems, but also the file size, all that. So the print version, I might have somebody who reads the ebook and then says, oh, I think I want to buy the print version too, because it's got her sketches in it. Or maybe you're going to give away something physical, bookmarks, or, even an extra book if you've got a whole bunch of out of print books laying around and you want to include that with a new release, or, there's a lot of different things you can do with print to kind of up the value there.
We're almost out of time, but I do want to ask, see if there's a myth about distribution and fulfillment that you want to debunk. This is your chance. You're tired of people saying something over and over again that every time you hear it, you just shake your head. So what's a top myth or two that you want to clear up right now?
I think for me, the top myth would be that all the money's in ebooks and it's not worth it to do print. I think that's the same as saying it's not worth it to do audio. Like, yes, there is extra effort. There's, maybe some output of money at the top or whatever. But to say that the only place you can make money is ebooks, or that's the only thing worth focusing on, I just don't think makes sense. There's a lot of print readers out there. So that would be one myth. And the other one would be that it's just too complicated. I know we've talked about a lot of different things here, and it probably felt a little overwhelming and complicated, but it really is doable for anybody. You just have to figure out what is the best route for you. And I know, like I said, we've talked about a lot of different options and even a lot of math, but I did put together kind of a PDF just to make it simpler and spell out the different options if you weren't taking notes or you just want to go back and review some of the things we talked about. So you can find that at stonewaterbooks.com/CPS, like Christian Publishing Show, CPS. And we'll just have a PDF there for you to download. So it'll just kind of step you through some of the things we talked about and some of the math, and hopefully help you determine what the best route for you is.
Excellent. We will have a link to that PDF, and if you want that in the show notes. Tracy, any final tips or encouragement?
I think, keep thinking of your writing business as both creativity and business. Don't be afraid of the business side. It can be intimidating, but it can also be really fun. And there's a lot to learn. And, this podcast and novel marketing podcast, and, there's just so much information and things to learn. So just, take it slow, learn what you can, and have fun with the business side of it too, not just the creative side.
Well said. Well said. Our sponsor today is the Christian Writers Market Guide. If you're wanting a list of companies that do fulfillment and distribution, if you're looking for people to help you print the book, if you want a list of printers, the Christian Writers Market Guide is the go-to source. It has over 1,000 listings for every different kind of professional you would need to help you along the way. And I believe Stonewater Books is in the Christian Writers Market Guide, if I'm not mistaken, and we'll have links to both the print and the online version. So just like with a regular book, you can buy it on Dead Trees, or you can get online access.
Thank you for listening to the Christian Publishing Show. For more information and to get episodes delivered to your phone automatically, visit christianpublishingshow.com.